Hello and welcome back to the channel, and here we are looking at white pepper jeans. Now today we're going to look at another one in our hole design series, and we're going to look at the one that personally I find probably the trickiest. So we're going to look at your standard mid-length par 4. Now the main thing to note with this one is this is going to be your bread and butter. You're going to have lots of these probably on a course, although little spoiler ahead, I tend to avoid them, and it's something I'm really going to be working on with a couple of my upcoming course designs. Now, the standard mid-length par 4 I would class as between 440 to 470 yards long. And so your job with this is really just the main thing is ensure variety within your entire set of those par 4s. So are you making sure they are doglegging, playing in different directions? You're changing the green complexes, sites, etc. Now, where we're going to start with this one is probably not where you'd expect. Given the short-ish nature of this hole, we're going to start by looking at the green. And the green really should define how you design your hole. I've seen a lot of people who will throw down their tee shot first, put the bunkers down, put the fairway down, put a green shape down, and that's about it, and work from the tee forwards. I really think you get better if you do green backwards. So one of the things I want to consider here, and I think this is good for all hole designs, but particularly this one, given that you're potentially coming in with wedge and stopping it. So we want to look at green angle. Well, where do you want to be off the tee? Angle-wise, to get at this one, you want to be coming up this way and seeing as much of the green as possible. That way, if you're a little bit long, you're still on the green, a little bit short. Left and right might be more interesting. Maybe you're a better player or a player who struggles with fasts or slows. In that case, maybe you want to be coming from this side because it's a bit more lateral. Either way, the fact that we've offset the green from the fairway a little bit makes life interesting. So I would argue that a lot of people would probably want to lay up down here. Now, given what we just said about distance, this area here is going to leave you around 150, 160 yards in. If you play driver down here, you've got a full wedge in at 120, 130 from a less ideal angle. So straight away, the green has provided interest in your club selection off the tee, but it's all because of where we've angled that green. It's nothing to do, we've not even looked at the tee shot yet. You secondly want to think about, I tend to leave slopes to the end, but maybe that might factor in early on. This green actually flows kind of front to back, so that then makes you think, well, I do really want a very lofted club, and actually if it flows front to back, I want a wedge in, so maybe I'm going to consider this side a little bit more than this side. And with this one, what I quite liked was the fact that it had that you could choose how you wanted to play it. It wasn't necessarily defined. You also want to think about your green site in general. I think with a hole that playability-wise could be as simple as hit driver, hit wedge, you've got a lot on to make it interesting. So your green sites really need to be good. This one was one that we picked out really early on as where we wanted our first green to be. We wanted it overlooking the ocean but not on the ocean. We wanted it taking you out to the key features, giving you big vistas. We wanted it propped up, and we found this great green site. We then staggered the bunkers so that you've got the visual of one short, one slightly long. Those sorts of things. Any tricks you can pull with green sites and how you hazard them to make it again look different, the better. So really, message number one would be with this sort of hole and many others, start with your green, work backwards. If you're going to struggle to add interest in terms of the club that's being hit in and making that challenging, let's make the green like a real site of interest and somewhere that looks really inviting. Okay, so we're going to look at another hole, and we're going to start by looking at hole 10 on Greenstone River. And you might notice first of all that it's 429, so technically falls a little bit below my definition. However, because it is 34 feet up from the tee, actually that's pushing it kind of into the same sort of range in terms of playability, which is an important point to note. Elevation change can be a way of making these sorts of holes play really interestingly. This hole is kind of defined by that valley in the middle and the green shape. So the elevation change really adds flavour. Imagine this if this were all flat and didn't have the land movement, it wouldn't be the same. But I want to go again and look at the green. Now, this sort of green we're going to take and work backwards. So originally I decided that I wanted these two plateaus and a low one kind of in the back. Now, once you see that, you've got these high plateaus here and here, low one down here. Well, that adds all sort of interest, and you want to think about how people might be approaching those pins from slightly different angles. For example, let's take this pin. You're approaching it from down here. You're not hitting at this red slope so much, whereas if you're hitting at it from over here, you're hitting more at the slope and potentially funneling on down. And one of the things I love doing with my greens is trying to have a slope that for every pin it hurts, see if you can have that same slope helping on a different pin. So for this pin up here, that slope is really in my mind as being I don't want to hit that. For this pin back here, I definitely want to hit that. I want to hit that and funnel down, and I'm going to roll up for a really nice birdie putt. The same with this one. For this one, well, for this one you definitely don't want to be down in that swale. Whereas for this pin, that's a complete green light. I want to be hitting at that backstop, funneling back down. And this one, you now look at this pin and go, well, if I want to get to this pin, I could roll it down here, I could roll it down here, I could come from this side and go straight at it and avoid either of the slopes side to side. It's kind of, once you start playing with the slopes in that sort of way and thinking about how might they affect the player differently from different regions, life gets more interesting. So what we're going to do now is, again, I would suggest that we start with the green shape and the major green slopes in play. You may want to slope later. I think for this one, because it was so clearly defined by those two tiers, I would tend to start by having that put in. And I then draw back measure tools as to, well, what if you're approaching it from different angles? If you're approaching it from here, there are 4 layup zones, I'd say, or 4 areas in this fairway that I kind of segmented it into. I'm going to show you them now. Now, I wouldn't have put this bunker in at the time, because this might have been one of the options, just like hit down the middle and you get to there and then at that. Now in this course, I decided I've had rough land, no fairway spline down, whatever. I'd have just had measure tools and gone, well, that's where my green's going to be. That's where the approaches are going to be played from, because I know that I would have had the hole roughly set down, but no surfaces. And then I'd have gone, well, which of these do I want to be position A1? How do I then want to protect against these off the tee? I would have then decided, let's first of all just have a little look. Let's imagine we lost this bunker completely. Yeah, we're going to lose a lot of stuff here. And some fairway, that's fine. Let's just fill that in. And you get a rough idea. If I can hit dead down the middle of the fairway and just hit to here with no problem, and it's not too perilous, it needs something really strong to encourage me to play to one side or the other. And in this case, the green is I'm trying to give options as to whether you go right or left. In that case, I would argue that you generally want to take one of those slightly more out of play. Now in this case, I put a central bunker in here, because I wanted that to factor in on multiple different tee shots. If you're trying to have a layup to here, I want that camber into this bunker being in your mind. If you're trying to hit all the way down to here, I want you thinking, well, if I pull my tee shot just a little bit and hit here, then I'm potentially hitting into it. And with this one, I wanted you to think, well, actually I can run it all the way down this slope and away from that bunker, or I can just skirt it and go along this side. I found basically one hazard that would be in play for multiple different tee shots in slightly different ways. But all of this is still going green backwards. Now, from that, I would have gone, well, I want to hit from here, from here, from here, from here, and those are my options, and then I start setting up my tee shot. This one actually didn't start with the green backwards. I found this spine when I was making this hole, and it's one of the favourites that I've done, which would deflect balls this way, or this way depending on how you hit it. Now a typical hogsback might come from about over here, so this spine is referred to as a hogsback. It's a type of template which I'm going to go into in future videos, and really it's typically used to reward shots that hit directly down the centre. They get a bit of a kick forward and they stay on that central path. If you hit slightly to the left, it's going to bounce off this way, slightly to the right, bounce off this way. So it's rewarding accuracy on par 4s. What I quite liked seeing was, what if I put the tee shot from this angle? Well, suddenly I'm then thinking about both, am I hitting it on the right line and am I hitting it on the right length? So imagine if I'm trying to chew off as much distance as possible and stay this side, if I can carry it to there, downwind, I'm going to get a lovely little kick and funnel down to here, and that is position A1. But that's taking on the risk that I might pull it slightly and end up all the way over here, and I'm in an awful position. Because it is A1 is here, A2 is actually here, or even back here, because those bunkers and this green is so punitive. If I'm over left on this one, that's just not quite position Z, but it's close. So really with this one, it was challenging people. You bite off as much of this spine as you possibly can, but don't go left. And then you start thinking, well, how can I make hitting to this right side not trivial? Well, we cut the fairway in a little bit, so you worry about going long, so that makes you, because for example, if I land it here, I might be running into that fairway or the bunker, that rough or the bunker. So that's going to make me more to the left and bring that left play really into the game, which I don't want. So it's challenging people in a couple of different ways without looking like there's that much going on. You've then got these two to make you a little less timid off the tee and not bail out all the way back here. Try and push you to this bit, and then again potentially pushing you to there. For a relatively benign fairway, there's a lot of trouble here if you're not careful, and it demands a lot more accuracy than it looks at a fairway that is 47, 48 yards wide. But all of this again defined by that green, so really the same message comes through again and again and again. Now, what I would come to next, I guess, are these what ifs. And if you're ever stuck with one of these, this is still a straight hole, but look at how the fairway's aligned. It's coming this way and then going up. So consider where your fairway alignment is, even on a hole that is based on waypoint straight. Do not feel constrained to this waypoint. You can have dog legs that look like straight holes. This one looks like a dog leg. It kind of is, kind of isn't. It's how I've cut the fairway. What if you move the tee over here? Well, suddenly it's a really different hole because those hazards are all playing differently. And maybe I'm wanting to hit driver down here, or 2 wood, 3 would even, still an old game, down to here to open up that angle. What if we have the tee over here? Well, then you're kind of just exacerbating that. Does it bring these hazards more into play? Those sorts of things. We did the what if with the greens. Well, what about if we lost these bunkers? What about if we brought water in front of them? Does that really change it? Bunkers are a slightly less severe hazard than water. So what if you put oh, I did already do this. There's a mound going into here, so can I land it short and funnel it on? You can. Will people see that? Will people try it? Do they have a short enough club, a too short a club that it won't roll? All of those sorts of things are interesting questions. And if in doubt you're stuck, go to your what ifs. What if I change the tee? What if I change where the fairway is? What if I just flip some of the bunkers from the right hand side to the left hand side? You can do it with measure tools. Again, if we just clear these out. Or another one that's like, these are all done with splines, but you could always just copy the shapes and move them. What if I put a bunker here and one here, and then go back to your tee shot? How does that change it? Do I want them? Does it make it a better hole? Another good test is almost always, if I removed a bunker, is the hole worse? The moment you get to a hole and you go, well, that bunker doesn't need to be there, you want to question whether it's adding anything visually or strategically. Recapping what we've done, these holes, the club that you've got in, kind of 7, 8, 9s, mid-irons really, they aren't that interesting to hit, I don't think, in terms of play, because they don't roll out as much as your long irons, so you can't factor in ground game as much. And sometimes on these holes people are going to have wedge because of wind, and then that really doesn't roll out, so you can't do as much with ground game on these. Equally, they're not short par fours, they're not drivable, so you can't really ramp up the options in the way that you can otherwise. These I find you have to be really subtle with, and you might want to work with your green sites a lot more on these types of holes. You can make them very, very playable, and you can make them difficult, you can make them easy, but you've got to think of your par fours as a group. Make sure that you're working with all of them and going, well, if I've done this sort of spine thing here, am I doing it on other holes? So with this one, if I know I've taken out the centre of the fairway pretty much completely on this hole, I'm going to make sure on my other par fours that I'm not doing that as much. Although I probably did still. You've got to know your tendencies as well, and mine tends to be that the middle of the fairway isn't a good play. I'm aware of that and I'm happy with it. Just be wary where your little kind of tendencies are. The only other thing I haven't mentioned would be your hazard placement generally. We've talked about this with the new game and people playing different club sets. I think most good designers tended to do this anyway. You'll notice this hazard is about 230 from the tee. We've then got one that is 290, 300, 324. Try to stagger your hazards both horizontally and vertically if you can. So this one, that's both on a left to right basis and on an up to down basis. If we're just having a fairway where our hazards are all at 275 and they're all here and all here, I'll just hit down the middle all day long and I'm probably not going in them, bar a really poor shot. If they are all at a certain distance as well, well, there's going to be some people who can just go, well, I've got a driver that carries 290, thank you very much, I'm fine. If they're all down one side, that becomes a more interesting one. If they are all down one side, I'd still try to hazard them horizontally, and I would try, I think I can probably find a better example on another hole. Actually, this one's a great example. So the hazards aren't all down this side, but your main hazard is down the left-hand side of this fairway. If that's the case, again, try to bring it on a diagonal so that the more you're trying to bite off, you have to be a little bit more accurate. That's not a complete 100% truth, but with this one, if you're hitting short at 270 odd, you've got 40 yards of fairway. That then narrows to around 20 yards, and when you factor in run out as well, you're going to be landing here, unless you're hitting with a fade, but if you're landing here, that fairway is narrowing exponentially the further you go up. So try to think about diagonals really with these holes as well. How can you make those hazards play more interestingly both on line and length? Now, yeah, I really do think that is all I've got, but consider the bunkering, consider really my main message with this and any other holes, but I think with this hole in particular, work from your green backwards. I hope that this has been helpful. You've seen a couple of different courses on this one. The Greenstone unfortunately isn't yet published. I'm still working out what I want to do with that one, and it's one of my earlier ones, so it may need a bit of a redo. Anyway, I hope that this has been useful, and it's definitely something that I'm trying to work on, and on future courses this is going to be an area where I go, well, I don't tend to do these so well. I always quite like working on things that I don't think I'm as good at. So this will be one where I look at and go, I don't tend to do these very often. Why am I not doing that length of hole? Can I really make that more interesting and turn that into a strength? Because even on this hole, which was a collab, I think we only had about 2 that were in that distance set. A lot of them were slightly shorter, and 11 is in that range, but 11 is just tough. So I don't think it was a great example for this one. Anyway, I hope that this has helped, and see you soon.